Hey, welcome to our channel. Make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell so you never miss our latest content.
I was never a man for big surprises. At 45, I lived my life by a quiet, predictable rhythm. I woke at 6:15 a.m. without an alarm, a human clock wound tight by years of habit. I'd let Scout, my Labrador, out into the misty morning yard before I even thought about my own coffee. The ritual was always the same: the grind of the beans, the gurgle of the machine, the solid weight of the ceramic mug in my hand. I'd take my coffee and the printed newspaper out to the varnished wooden porch, the one overlooking the garden Lorelei used to love, and watch the sun bleed across the horizon. My job as a regional sales manager for an agricultural firm wasn't thrilling. It didn't make for exciting stories at dinner parties. But it was stable. It was reliable, and for a long time, that was enough. Lorelei, my wife of 12 years, used to say she admired that about me. She called me her anchor, the one steady thing in a world of constant, churning chaos. But lately, her admiration had begun to feel like a eulogy for a love that was already gone. The steadiness she once praised now seemed to bore her. It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 tiny, almost invisible shifts. A death by 1,000 paper cuts. She still smiled, of course. She still gave me that quick, dry kiss on the cheek before heading off to her work as a holistic therapist, a career she'd embraced 5 years ago with a passion that once felt inspiring. She still posted photos of us on social media, smiling, always smiling, with captions full of hashtags like #couplegoals and #sacred union. But her eyes, that was the first place I saw it. A slight delay, a flicker of something distant. Her affection, once a warm and easy current between us, now had a hesitation to it, like a stream encountering a dam I couldn't see. Her text messages, once filled with little details of her day, grew shorter, terse, functional, running late. Don't wait up. Okay. Our weekends, which used to be filled with long, meandering walks with Scout in the park or lazy marathons of old black and white movies, were now fragmented. She was always going to some new retreat, an energy alignment session, a meeting with a client who was having, as she put it, a major inner awakening. I was happy for her, I told myself. She was finding her path, but her path seemed to be leading further and further away from me. I'm not a fool, but I'm not the paranoid type, either. I don't go looking for shadows in well-lit rooms. So, it took me a while to admit, even to myself, the uncomfortable pang I felt in my chest every time she mentioned his name. Jasper. It was always Jasper. The sensitive friend, the emotional guide, the spiritual mentor. We had met him together, 2 years earlier, at a conscious breathing workshop in Asheville. I had gone only to please her, sitting awkwardly on a floor cushion while a room full of strangers hyperventilated to the sound of pan flutes. I felt ridiculous. Jasper, however, had dived right in. He spoke of cosmic connections and vibrational frequencies with a serene confidence that had Lorelei utterly captivated. Since then, he had become a constant presence in her conversations. At first, it was just admiration. Jasper says we hold trauma in our hips. Then, it became too much admiration. Jasper has such a profound understanding of the divine feminine. Lately, something more intimate, more unsettling, had crept into every reference. Jasper told me something that made me think of you, she'd say, though she never explained what it was. Or the one that truly chilled me: Jasper is helping us grow as a couple, Elliot, even without him realizing it. But he was realizing it, and so was I. Still, I never expected her to take the next step so directly, so boldly. It was our anniversary, 12 years. I'd kept it simple, just the way we used to like it. I made fresh pasta from scratch, opened a bottle of good Cabernet, and lit a fire in the hearth. Scout was sleeping soundly at the foot of the couch, his soft snores filling the comfortable silence. It was perfect, or it should have been. That's when she put down her fork. She looked at me, her gaze filled with a practiced, almost rehearsed gentleness, and she said it. Elliot, what would you think? She paused, as if weighing the most delicate words in the world, if we invited Jasper to spend a weekend with us at the lake house. The question didn't just hang in the air. It sucked all the oxygen out of the room. The crackle of the fire seemed to stop. Even Scout's breathing seemed to hitch. The seconds that passed before I could even process it felt like hours. I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her face, searching for what was left of the woman I had fallen in love with. the woman who would have laughed at the absurdity of such a suggestion. But the woman across from me was smiling sweetly, as if she'd just proposed we try a new recipe for risotto. Maybe, in her mind, it really was that trivial. "Are you serious?" The words came out dry, raspy. It was a tone she hadn't heard from me in a very, very long time. And in that moment, I knew. The fracture wasn't subtle anymore. It was a gaping chasm right through the heart of our home. Lorelei nodded slowly, her expression one of serene maturity, as if this suggestion was a profound gesture of marital evolution. "It would be good for us. He's someone who helps us. Helps me grow emotionally. I feel like his presence could open up new possibilities for our connection." Our connection. The words were a lie, and we both knew it. She wasn't trying to build a bridge between us. She was trying to get me to help her build a bridge for him, right into the center of our lives. A laugh bubbled up inside me. Not a laugh of humor. It was a nervous, incredulous, hysterical laugh, but I swallowed it down. I kept my face a calm, placid mask. If she wanted to play a game of spiritual enlightenment and emotional maturity, then I would play. Just on my own term. I raised my wine glass. He toasted to the proposal, gently clinked my glass against hers. "Sure," I replied, my voice even. "Why not?" The look of relieved surprise on her face was almost comical. She actually believed it. She believed I was so steady, so predictable, so utterly devoid of a spine, that I would simply agree. That night, lying in bed beside her, her breathing even and deep as she slept the peaceful sleep of the victor, I didn't feel anger. Not yet. That would come later. What I felt was a cold, sharp clarity. There were no more doubts, no more excuses. There was only a plan, quietly and methodically forming in the darkness. If she wanted to test the limits of our marriage, I would show her that I knew how to play, too, only smarter. The following week was a study in contrasts. Lorelei was a whirlwind of joyous preparation. The weekend at the lake house, the house my father had left to me, nestled in the woods near Lake Lure, was now her grand project. It was her favorite place in the world. The energy there, she always said, just flowed better. She curated playlists of Tibetan singing bowls, picked out expensive organic wines, and bought new incense that smelled of sandalwood and betrayal. She set aside books on tantra and conscious coupling. She even bought a new white linen dress, as if she were some kind of priestess preparing for a sacred rite. Meanwhile, my own preparations were quieter, more discreet. I arranged for some preventative maintenance on the house. I had a trusted local handyman change the locks on the doors. I had him test the heater and clean the air conditioner filters. Plausible reasons for a visit. And then, I made a call to someone I hadn't seen in months. Pai Sutton. Paige and I had been friends since we were kids. We'd built forts together, scraped our knees on the same sidewalks, and gotten into trouble in the same high school classroom. Now, she was a razor-sharp divorce attorney in Atlanta. She was pragmatic, fiercely loyal, and had a bullshit detector that was second to none. I didn't explain everything over the phone. I kept it vague. I just said I needed her presence that weekend, a friendly face. I told her I'd cover her travel, her gas, and even cook her my famous pasta primavera. She laughed, the sound warm and familiar over the line. "Elliot Vance, asking for a favor? This must be serious." She agreed, but not without a warning. "If this turns into one of those stories that ends in a marital disaster," she said, her tone shifting from playful to professional, "give me a heads up first. I prefer not to be a surprise witness." Emberlay. I looked out the window of my office, at the steady, predictable world outside. "I don't know the ending yet, Paige," I replied, my voice low. "But I promise it'll be unforgettable." The drive to the lake was surreal. Lorelei was lighter than I had seen her in years. She hummed along to old songs on the radio, songs from the beginning of our relationship. She rested her hand on my thigh, her touch feeling alien and performative. She spoke about the future, about how this weekend was a turning point, a beautiful step in our conscious uncoupling from outdated paradigms. She was high on her own narrative, believing so deeply in the story she was spinning that she couldn't see the truth sitting right next to her. To her, inviting her lover to our anniversary getaway was simply a consequence of our emotional evolution. I just smiled. I kept my eyes fixed on the winding mountain road, my hands steady on the wheel, my heart numb. I was an actor in the final scene of a play, and I was the only one who knew how it was going to end. When we arrived, the late afternoon sun was filtering through the tall pines, dappling the porch in gold. Lorelei stepped out of the car with a theatrical sigh of contentment. "Oh, Elliot, smell that air. The scent of the grass. It's perfect. The temperature is perfect for a morning swim. Thou." Her expression of perfect bliss completely shattered when she saw her. Paige Sutton appeared on the porch, swirling a glass of red wine, a calm, knowing smile on her face. She was leaning against a pillar as if she owned the place, as if she'd been waiting for us all along. "Paige?" Lorelei's voice was suddenly a low, tight whisper. The vibrant energy drained from her face, leaving behind a pale mask of confusion and suspicion. "Surprise," I said, my voice deliberately cheerful as I grabbed our suitcases from the trunk. "I thought it'd be nice to have someone special with us this weekend. Don't you think?" Lorelei's response was stuck in her throat. She just stood there, rooted to the gravel driveway, her gaze darting between my face and Paige's wineglass. And there, in that awkward, stretching silence, the first irreparable, visible crack opened wide. The weekend was an exercise in controlled tension. Paige was a master. She acted perfectly at ease, as if she had been part of the plan from the very beginning. She sat in a lounge chair, chatted about her latest cases, and complimented the beautiful weather. She never once acknowledged the suffocating awkwardness that Lorelei was radiating like a toxic aura. I watched everything silently, almost impassively. But inside, I was a scientist, studying every gesture, every flicker in my wife's eyes. She was trying to understand, trying to regain control of a situation she had so carefully orchestrated, only to find the script had been completely rewritten without her knowledge. I don't really understand," she murmured as soon as we were alone in the kitchen, her voice strained. "You said we'd be spending time alone, and we will," I replied calmly, unpacking groceries. "Paige is only staying until tomorrow morning. She has commitments back in Atlanta. I just thought it'd be nice to have some company for dinner. It's been a while since we all caught up, right?" She nodded slowly. She was too surprised, too thrown off balance to argue. She couldn't accuse me of anything. I was just doing what she'd suggested, wasn't I? Inviting someone to join us. The hypocrisy was so thick you could cut it with a knife, but she couldn't call it out without exposing herself. Dinner was a masterpiece of discomfort. Paige and I fell into an easy rhythm, laughing about old stories, reminiscing about trips and parties from a lifetime ago. We were a united front of shared history. Lorelei, on the other hand, was a ghost at her own table. She was restless, disconnected, her mind clearly miles away. She kept checking her phone under the table, her thumb anxiously swiping, waiting for a message, a call, some signal from her spiritual guide to pull her out of an environment that suddenly, terrifyingly, no longer felt like her territory. The next morning, Paige thanked us for the hospitality with a warm hug for me and a polite, cool nod for Lorelei. She gave me a quick, almost imperceptible wink before she got in her car and drove away. The air she left behind was saturated with unspoken questions. Minutes later, Lorelei was packing her own bag. "I have a headache," she announced, not meeting my eyes. "I think I overdid it with the wine last night. I'm just not in sync with the place right now. I need to get back to the city." I didn't insist. I didn't argue. I just stood on the porch and watched her leave in a hurry, leaving behind the white linen dress still hanging on the closet door, a pale specter of the weekend she had planned. As soon as her car disappeared down the long, winding road, I pulled out my phone and called a number I had discreetly saved days earlier. It was time for the next phase of the plan. "He's on his way." The private detective's name was Marcus Thorne. He was ex-military, with a voice that was gravelly and all business. He was experienced, discreet, and offered a service he described as almost surgical. He delivered proof without leaving traces. Within an hour of my call, he was already in motion, a silent shadow ready to follow Lorelei's next steps. My gut told me she wasn't going home, and my gut, for the first time in a long time, was something I decided to trust completely. That same day, by late afternoon, the first images arrived on my secure messaging app. My hands were steady as I opened them. A picture of Lorelei checking into a boutique hotel in downtown Charlotte, a place I'd never heard of. She wasn't alone for long. The next image was of him, Jasper, arriving shortly after, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and sunglasses, as if he were a celebrity fleeing the paparazzi. He looked cheap, small, Not at all like the enlightened guru Lorelei described. Then came the sequence of photos that confirmed everything my heart already knew, but my mind had refused to accept. The two of them in the hotel restaurant, laughing, her hand covering his. Them walking hand in hand through a small art gallery nearby, her head resting on his shoulder. And finally, the last, damning image, the two of them entering her hotel room together, his arm wrapped securely around her waist. The images left no room for doubt, no space for spiritual interpretation. They were more than just spiritual friends. They were lovers. I wasn't surprised, disappointed, yes, a deep, hollow ache spread through my chest, the final confirmation of a death I had been mourning for months. But I wasn't surprised. It only confirmed that the sacred bond between us, the one she so eagerly posted about on social media, had been broken long before that night with the wine and the fireplace. But more than sadness, what I felt was an icy clarity, a sense of purpose that was sharp and absolute. I didn't want revenge out of anger. That was messy, uncontrolled. I wanted justice out of dignity. I wanted to reclaim the respect she had so casually thrown away. And above all, I wanted Lorelei to face the consequences of her choices. Not in front of me, not in front of a lawyer, but in front of the one person whose opinion she still, foolishly, believed she controlled. Her own mother. Lorelei returned home late that night, a phantom gliding through the house she no longer belonged in. She avoided my eyes, offering vague, clipped explanations about her headache and a client emergency. The dinner I had left for her on the table was cold and untouched. I waited for her in the living room, seated, my expression a carefully constructed blank slate. We spoke only the basics, short, functional words, like two strangers sharing the same roof. There was no mention of Charlotte, no justification for her sudden departure, and to my surprise, not a single question about Paige's unexpected presence at the lake house. It was as if she preferred clinging to the fragile silence rather than risking a conversation that might lead to the truth. She wanted the illusion to hold, just for a little while longer. The next day, I executed the final stage of my plan with the same precision I applied to my work spreadsheets. I went to a print shop and had Marcus Thorne's photos printed on high-quality, matte paper. Not to spread online, not to publicly humiliate her, just enough so there would be no denying them. Tangible proof of her lies. I tucked them into the places of our shared life, creating a silent trail of truths hidden in plain sight. One inside her favorite meditation book. Another slipped into the back of a silver picture frame in the living room, a photo of us, smiling on our honeymoon. I placed several more under the sofa cushions, beneath the placemats on the dining table, and under the flower vase in the center. Then, I called Eleanor, my mother-in-law. She was an elegant woman of 70, with measured speech and an impeccable posture that spoke of old money and even older principles. She had always been fond of me. She called me a man of integrity, a phrase she always delivered with a sigh, as if I were a nearly extinct species. Eleanor, I said, my voice warm and steady. I was hoping you might join Lorelei and me for a special dinner tonight. It's been too long. She accepted enthusiastically. When I told Lorelei her mother was coming, a flicker of panic crossed her face. My mother? Why? Is everything okay? Everything is perfect, I said, smiling. I just thought it would be good for us all to be together. Her suspicion warred with her desire to maintain the facade of a happy marriage. The facade won. She accepted, albeit hesitantly. Eleanor arrived promptly at 7, wearing a navy blue dress and carrying a homemade apple pie. She hugged me affectionately and greeted her daughter with a tender kiss. We sat at the table and began to chat about trivialities, the weather, local politics, Lorelei's new project with patients seeking inner healing. The scene was perfectly, horribly normal, and then it happened. Eleanor reached for the cloth napkin in front of her. As she unfolded it in her lap, she found the first photo. Lorelei and Jasper, laughing, holding hands in the art gallery. I pretended not to notice. I continued talking about interest rates. Eleanor fell silent. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, slowly scanned the image. Her hand, holding the napkin, trembled almost imperceptibly. She placed the photo face down on the table and picked up her water glass. Beneath it was another photo. This one of him, his arm around her at the hotel. Then she shifted the flower vase slightly. Another. The silence grew heavy, pressing down on us. Mom, what is it? Lorelei asked, her voice tight with forced nonchalance. Vanessa tried to take the photos from her mother's hands, but Eleanor pulled away firmly, her matriarchal authority absolute. She held them up to the light, her face a mask of disbelief turning slowly to stone. "Is this true?" she asked, her voice trembling not with rage, but with a deep, profound disappointment. Lorelei's face was ashen. She didn't know how to respond. She looked at me, her eyes pleading, but she found no rescue there. I then stood up, placed my own napkin neatly on the table, and said calmly, my voice resonating in the charged silence, "Eleanor, you don't need to see any more of this. I'll call a car to take you home." I looked at her directly, my voice softening with genuine regret. "I'm truly sorry for involving you in this, but I thought you deserved to know who your daughter has become." Eleanor lowered her head. She didn't argue. She picked up her purse, stared at her daughter with an expression of deep, soul-crushing disappointment, and left without saying another word. The sound of the front door closing was like a gunshot. Lorelei stood frozen. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She just breathed, short, shallow gasps, as if struggling to keep control. I looked at her, the woman who had become a stranger in my own home. "Now," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "it's just the two of us." Vanessa stood in the middle of the living room, as if time had frozen around her. The photos were now scattered everywhere, not just to be seen, but to be felt. Each image's presence was like a voice screaming the truth she had tried to hide for months. I walked slowly, silently, gathering the glasses from the table and taking them to the sink. The simple, domestic act seemed to unnerve her more than any shouting match could have. My calmness was a wall she couldn't scale. She finally approached, her face tense, her eyes restless. "You planned all of this." It wasn't a question, it was an accusation. "I did," I replied, my back still to her as I rinsed a glass. "You gave me the reason, I just gave it structure. You called my mother, you planned for her to see that. What kind of man does that?" I slowly turned, placing the wet glass on the counter with a soft click. I looked her straight in the eyes, and for the first time, I let her see the cold anger I had been holding back. "The kind of man who was humiliated without raising his voice," I said, my voice level but sharp. "The kind of man who sat beside his wife on their anniversary while she asked to bring her lover disguised as a friend to spend a weekend in the house he inherited from his father. The kind of man who got tired of being made a fool of while pretending everything was normal." She crossed her arms, a pathetic attempt to maintain some posture of defiance. "That doesn't justify what you did to my mother. And what you did to me justifies what, exactly?" I interrupted, my words like razors. "You wanted me to make space in my marriage for another man. You wanted me to invite the guy who was touching you behind my back to share our fireplace. And you expected me to say what? Sure, honey, grab 2 pillows. Let's all sleep in the same bed." She lowered her eyes for a moment, then tried a different tactic. "The victim." I was confused. She whispered, "I thought we could try something different. You've been so distant the last few months." I laughed then, a short, humorless bark. "Distant?" I was busy trying to hold together a marriage where only one of us was actually present. You replaced me with coded messages, energetic meetings, and hidden touches at retreats I didn't even know you were attending. You wanted something different, Lorelei. You got it. You just didn't expect the difference to come from me, did you? She walked to the sofa and sat down heavily, pressing her temples with her fingers. "I made a mistake. Okay, I messed up. But you set this all up like it was some kind of dirty game." I approached slowly, stopping in front of her. "This wasn't a game," I said, my voice softening slightly, not out of pity, but for emphasis. "This was the only way for you to see what you refused to admit. You didn't fall into a trap, Lorelei. You built every single step of it with your own choices." She stood up then, a flash of her old fire in her eyes. "So what do you want now, Elliot? For me to leave? To beg for your forgiveness?" "No," I replied dryly. "I want you to own it. No detours, no spiritual justifications, no blaming me. Say it, plainly." She hesitated, her eyes darting around the room, at the smiling faces in the photographs that now seemed to mock her. She looked at the floor, then finally, back at me, and for the first time, without defense or argument, her voice barely a whisper, she said it. "I cheated on you." The silence that followed was crushing. It was the sound of something breaking completely, beyond any hope of repair. There were no more masks, no more enlightened fantasies. There was only what remained, a dead love, a devastated man, and a woman who only now seemed to understand the depth of the abyss she had dug for herself. I walked to my office, picked up a blue folder from my desk, and returned. I handed it to her firmly. "Here's the initial document. I spoke with my lawyer this morning." Her eyes widened in shock. "She's already filed for divorce and prepared a draft outlining how the separation will proceed. I don't want to be your husband anymore, Lorelai. And you haven't wanted to be my wife for a very long time. You just didn't have the courage to admit it." She opened the folder with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the terms. Her face hardened. "You're keeping the house? And the lake house, too?" "Both were inherited by me. They've been solely in my name since before we were married. My father's will had protective clauses. You knew that, Lorelai. You just thought it would never be necessary to enforce them." She slammed the folder shut. "This is cruel." "No," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "Cruel was you destroying a 12-year story because of an inflated ego disguised as self-discovery. Cruel was leaving me talking to myself night after night while you were meeting another man in hotels. Cruel was looking me in the eyes, pretending to love me, while trying to turn me into the biggest fool in North Carolina. That was cruel." She walked to the front door, stopped, and looked back, her eyes finally watery with tears she could no longer hold back. "Do you still love me?" The question hung in the air, a final, desperate plea. I took a deep breath, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of all those years. Then I gave her the only truth I had left. "I still love the idea of who you used to be," I said with brutal honesty. "But the woman standing in front of me now, I don't recognize her anymore." "Oh." I took a final, deep breath, looked straight at her, and delivered the final sentence. "Pack your things, Lorelai. This is my house now, and you don't belong here anymore." She left. She didn't slam the door. She didn't scream or cry. She just disappeared into the dark hallway like a ghost who had finally accepted she no longer had a place to haunt. And I, for the first time in months, sat on the sofa with Scout's heavy head in my lap, closed my eyes, and breathed. Really breathed. The air filled my lungs, clean and cold. It was the breath of peace. The days that followed were filled with an absolute, deafening silence. The house, which I now occupied alone, felt larger, colder, but paradoxically, more truthful. There were no more disguises, no more empty conversations about energy flows that were meant to cover up secret meetings. For the first time in a long, long time, solitude didn't feel like a condemnation. It felt like liberation. Lorelai, on the other hand, quickly discovered the immense weight of her choices. She left with only 2 suitcases, finding temporary refuge in a small, sterile rented apartment in Charlotte. She tried to contact Jasper, the man for whom she had risked everything, but found only silence. The guru who spoke so eloquently about soul connections and shared growth vanished the moment the situation demanded more than clandestine encounters and whispered platitudes. He disappeared from social media. He blocked her number. He never showed up at the same spiritual retreats again. To Jasper, Lorelai had been just a convenient chapter, an entertaining diversion in his long life of fleeting affairs. Without a husband, a lover, or a home, her life became a shadow of what it once was. Many of her holistic therapy clients began to distance themselves as discreet rumors about her separation surfaced, not because they judged her personal life, but because they saw in her a profound disorder that contrasted sharply with the image of serene balance she had always preached. She couldn't sell peace when she was so clearly at war with herself. But the worst consequence, the one that truly broke her, was her mother. Eleanor never again spoke to her with the same affection. Their meetings were strained, filled with an impassable barrier of disappointment. The look in her mother's eyes that night had become a permanent judgment. I, meanwhile, took a different path. After the initial months of numbness, I realized that work wasn't enough to fill the void. Inspired by my own painful experience, I started volunteering at a local community center, giving informal talks to groups of men going through traumatic divorces. I didn't speak of revenge or bitterness. I spoke of clarity, of how to recognize the signs, how to act with dignity, and most importantly, how to not let someone else's betrayal define your identity. Paige, the childhood friend who had served as a strategic piece in my plan, remained a constant. She would call just to check in, our conversations an easy comfort. She was the first person to show me that true friendship doesn't vanish in the face of crisis. Over time, our relationship gained a new meaning. There was no rush, No romanticization, just a sincere, quiet companionship that grew naturally, like a tree in fertile soil. I wasn't trying to replace Lorelai. I was rediscovering that it was still possible to trust someone. Months later, Lorelai's lawyer confirmed what Paige and I already knew. The assets were ironclad, protected by inheritance clauses. All that remained for her were her personal belongings, which she collected one silent afternoon, avoiding eye contact with me as she moved like a stranger through rooms that were once hers. When she left the lake house for the last time to pick up some paintings, Scout, who had once adored her, barked nonstop from the porch. She tried to pet him, but he pulled away and ran back to my feet. It was as if even the smallest, most innocent bonds had been irrevocably broken. The unexpected came months later, in a chance encounter. I was at a cafe in Asheville, reading the paper, when I saw her hurrying in, flustered, and late for something. She didn't see me at first, but when she did, she froze for a few seconds. She walked over to my table, her face a mixture of resentment and regret. "I never imagined you'd be capable of doing to me what you did," she said, her voice low and bitter. I slowly folded my newspaper, placed it on the table, and looked up at her calmly. "I also never imagined you'd be capable of doing to me what you did," I replied, my voice even. "I guess we're even." She lowered her eyes, muttered something unintelligible, and left the cafe as quickly as she had entered. It was our last meeting. Time passed. I learned to enjoy the silence of the house. I learned to appreciate the quiet mornings with Scout, the simple pleasure of reading a book at night without wondering where my wife really was. I rediscovered peace in the predictable rhythms of my life. The story reached its logical end, but not without a certain poetic irony. The woman who believed she was controlling the threads of life, pulling her husband along in her grand spiritual drama, discovered too late that the strings were being pulled from the other side. I didn't win because I destroyed my wife. She did that all on her own. I won because I didn't let her destruction drag me down. 2. Sometimes, life doesn't pay you back in the same coin. It pays you back with something far more powerful: freedom.